Not every game releases perfect, but to say that some games needed more time to get their acts together is an understatement. While other titles would meander and fade away into the night, these games took the feedback, and Backlash, let's be honest, to heart and improved things dramatically. So let's take a closer look. No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky was hyped to the high heavens, no one can deny that. But the launch was missing so much, and we're not talking about the lack of meeting other people, which was stated to be very hard, not impossible. The lack of decent closure in the story, repetitive gameplay, no huge space battles, the list goes on. Hello Games went dark for some time, prompting more backlash, but eventually emerged with the Foundation update, which brought base building. This was followed by the Pathfinder update, which introduced new vehicles and survival mode, and then Atlas Rises, which added significantly more story content. The next update added 4-player co-op, while the Beyond brought support for 32 players on one server. All of these updates were free, redeeming the developer's reputation somewhat. Destiny. The story of Destiny is one that's still mired in mystery, but the story of its development is one of missed deadlines, misaligned visions, and crunch. The initial narrative by Joseph Staten was rejected, resulting in a complete retooling of the game months before launch. The finished project was buggy with numerous server issues, a non-existent story, terrible missions, and great gunplay. Bungie continued expanding on it with 2 disappointing DLCs before releasing The Taken King, which injected some much-needed narrative coherence into the universe. Though content was kind of bare and Rise of Iron somewhat disappointing, Destiny ended its lifespan on a high note with Age of Triumph. Destiny 2. Bungie then repeated its annoying process of terrible launches with Destiny 2. Missing numerous quality-of-life features and improvements while stripping away features like Rumble, heroic strikes, and class customization. Destiny 2 was also panned for its storytelling. Over the many months that followed, Bungie brought back almost every feature from Destiny 1, while introducing a few new additions like Prestige Nightfalls, Masterwork weapons and armor, etc. It struck gold with Forsaken, which was the height of lore and storytelling, saw some ups and downs with its annual pass, and then returned to the moon with middling applause for Armor 2.0 and Shadowkeep. The Vex Offensive is kind of a bust, but a new season is almost upon us. Tom Clancy's The Division. The Division was smooth sailing when playing through the story and hitting max level. Sadly, players then hit Endgame, a gear score grinding slog where the loot was minuscule and higher difficulties too punishing. That's not including the sheer amount of bugs or the game forcing players into the dark zone. Eventually, Ubisoft Massive would overhaul things with Update 1.3, toning down the difficulty while upping the rewards. Subsequent updates would add new content like world events, resistance, and much more. All in all, despite all the nerfs and remaining bugs, The Division became a top-tier looter-shooter in the end. Assassin's Creed Unity. Of course, nothing could quite compare to the mess that was Assassin's Creed Unity when it first launched. Buggy and broken with performance issues, co-op was a major component that flat out didn't work. Microtransactions and their reminders were irritating. The game felt like little more than a collectathon, and of course the story wasn't good. While Ubisoft issued apologies, even doling out a free game and DLC as compensation, it ultimately took to fixing a number of issues. Assassin's Creed Unity still doesn't have the best gameplay or story in the series, but at least fans could appreciate its highly detailed world without any major technical hangups. For Honor. For Honor, like many Ubisoft titles, had a lot of potential. The MOBA-esque nature of Dominion mode felt compelling, while Duel and Brawl promised to highlight the more nuanced nature of its fighting systems. Unfortunately, the game suffered from the usual technical and performance issues, not to mention some terrible peer-to-peer matchmaking. Balance was an issue, but so was the development team's response time. As player population dwindled, even going so far as to host a blackout on the official subreddit until issues were addressed, Ubisoft began the process of fixing the game. Heroes were balanced, costs were adjusted, certain mechanics like revenge were overhauled, and dedicated servers were finally introduced. Today, For Honor enjoys a strong community with new heroes, maps, and modes added. Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Though Monolith Productions faced a number of controversies before Middle-earth: Shadow of War released, the final product was generally quite fun. Well, except for the one thing that saw little to no change: the introduction of war chests for loot, orcs, and boosters. It was bad enough dealing with the RNG nature of the boxes and the grindy Shadow Wars endgame, but there were also chests that could be purchased with real money. These contained legendary and epic weapons or orcs. Several months later, Monolith removed the war chest system and in-game store while making the overall endgame less grindy. Star Wars Battlefront 2. How do you utterly tank your game with controversy before launch? Well, look to Star Wars Battlefront 2. Not only did it make the star card system inherently pay to win, but also locked it behind RNG loot boxes. A confusing crafting system, problematic servers and bugs, a boring campaign, and so on were also major issues. But this is the game that started all the campaigning against removing loot boxes in games, right up to the political level. Since then, DICE had changed the progression system entirely. Loot crates now only give credits and cosmetic items. Crystals could be purchased to buy other cosmetics directly. Skill points were granted for playing certain classes or heroes, and could be used to upgrade or unlock star cards. A swath of new content and modes, from 4-player co-op PvE missions to new maps and heroes, were also added to a generally positive response. Mass Effect 3. At launch, Mass Effect 3 seemingly had it all. Sure, the gameplay felt more like a third-person shooter than squad-based third-person RPG, but it was still the culmination of player choices over several years. Finally, the end was here. Of course, then players got to the ending and were disappointed, to say the least, at the relative lack of choice. Such was the backlash against Mass Effect 3's ending that BioWare would release an optional extended cut, which significantly added on to the game's ending, along with providing a fourth choice. Of course, having oodles of free support for the game's surprisingly fun multiplayer mode didn't hurt either. Infamous 2. When you think Cole McGrath from Infamous, you probably remember the dude with a buzz cut and scowling expression. For Infamous 2, Sucker Punch decided to change up his look, giving him some darker hair, a t-shirt, arm tattoos, and trendier pants. Unsurprisingly, fans revolted, which resulted in the developer changing his look back. To be fair, Infamous 2's Cole still retained some of the wardrobe changes, like the t-shirt and less grungy pants, so it was a nice compromise overall. Diablo 3. The number of things that can and did go wrong with a sequel like Diablo 3 are too much to count. But in the midst of server problems, bugs, and other issues, the development team's tenets with regards to loot, difficulty, and rewards were perhaps the most problematic. Legendaries were rare to the point of being stingy, not to mention dropping for the wrong classes. You needed great gear to play the more challenging difficulties, but said gear could only be earned from those difficulties. Magic gear and weapons could sometimes be outright better than rares. So Blizzard worked over 2 years and completely overhauled the loot system, added a new adventure mode and Nephilim Rifts as endgame content, released new story content with Reaper of Souls, and offered much more build diversity than before. Also, no more auction house. Hooray! The result was a Diablo 3 that stood as an exemplary action RPG looter despite its many initial hangups. Fallout 3. Contrary to what could have gone wrong with Fallout 3, Bethesda actually did a pretty good job translating the universe's tone and mechanics into a first-person shooter/RPG. Where it messed up, besides the bugs, was in the endings. The Lone Wanderer essentially had no choice but to enter the control room and activate the Purifier, almost assuredly dying from radiation in the end. What's that? Sending your radiation-immune friend in? Yeah, not happening. With the Broken Steel DLC, Bethesda made it so that there was more choice, and even if the Lone Wanderer was sent inside, they would recover sometime later. Everyone was happy, except Sarah if she was sent inside. Spoilers, she still doesn't make it. Final Fantasy XIV. Square Enix had a good thing on its hands with Final Fantasy XI and set out on making another MMO with Final Fantasy XIV. So, what went wrong? Well, lack of coordination between departments, an overall lack of vision for the MMO, lack of quality features that competitors had adopted, and of course, some baffling systems and terrible performance. Square Enix would do the unthinkable though. It kept the broken version running, not charging for subscriptions, and still added new content while fixing major issues. Meanwhile, it worked on a separate, completely new version of the game that would be given out to consumers for free, complete with a new engine, story, better servers, and so much more. This would go on to replace the older game as Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. Since then, fans have lauded the MMO as one of the greatest currently available. Street Fighter V. Coming off of Ultra Street Fighter 4, Capcom seemingly had everything it needed to make Street Fighter V a success. However, it was revealed to have little content. Standard features like arcade mode were just gone, and several issues with its systems that reduced the skill gap at launch. This isn't even taking into account all of the problems with online matchmaking and netcode overtime. Capcom would add content to the game, bringing back arcade mode and implementing more story content, while further improving the gameplay with new V-triggers, fighters, and much more. Street Fighter V Champion Edition continues that trend, offering all of its DLC in one compelling package. While no stranger to controversies after launch, see adverts during fights, Capcom continues to work on the sequel and support it for fans. Rainbow Six Siege. Starting out as Rainbow Six Patriots and eventually rebooted as a multiplayer tactical shooter, Rainbow Six Siege was already on shaky ground. And while critics praised its mechanics and the tense nature of its matches, the lack of variety in modes, hit detection issues, problematic netcode, and throwaway single-player didn't earn it many points. It was assumed to be dead on arrival, but Ubisoft took to supporting the shooter with new operators, significant improvements to server infrastructure, including a shift to dedicated servers for all modes, and free maps. Improved balance and other bug fixes to tune it for competitive play resulted in Rainbow Six Siege being one of the premier competitive shooters out today. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.